What happens to the soul after death? One man, a Muslim, claims to have experienced clinical death and witnessed a shocking truth. This story will move you to your core. Stay with us until the end to discover the incredible details of his experience and the message that might change your life. Ahmed was born in a small town in the east. His childhood was simple yet happy. The daily call to prayer from the minaret was as familiar to him as the sound of the wind or the chirping of birds. He grew up in a family where faith was the foundation of everything: life, relationships, even plans for the future. From an early age, he was taught that good deeds and sincerity are the keys to blessings, both in this life and the eternal one. As he grew older, Ahmed became a hard-working and honest man. He worked in a small workshop, repairing watches and jewelry. Every day, he thanked Allah for the opportunity to earn bread for his family. But deep inside, he never asked himself the questions that occasionally trouble us all: what happens when it all ends? What awaits us beyond? Like many, Ahmed believed he had many years ahead to figure out the answers. He lived an ordinary life, surrounded by worries and joys, until fate reminded him of just how fragile life can be. It happened on a day that began like any other. Ahmed left his house at dawn. The streets were still asleep, with only the early merchants starting to arrange their goods. He walked his usual path to the workshop, thinking about new orders and plans. But he would never make it there. At an intersection, he was struck by a car. The impact was severe. He was thrown several meters. A crowd gathered around him, some called for an ambulance, while others stood praying. Ahmed lay motionless, his breathing barely audible. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived. In the hospital, a battle for his life began. The doctors did everything they could, but time passed, and Ahmed's heart grew weaker. Several hours after admission, his heart stopped. His body lay still, but his consciousness moved to another place. At that moment, when everything ceased, he felt a strange silence. Not the kind you experience at night, but a frightening stillness, as if the world itself had disappeared. Ahmed tried to understand what was happening, but the sensations were entirely unfamiliar. Suddenly, he felt movement, as though something was pulling him upward, but he couldn't see where. The space around him seemed both empty and infinite. It was strange. He knew he still existed, but his sense of self, his familiar I, had vanished. Ahmed remembered how his consciousness slowly shifted to a place that could not be described in human words. The space around him was filled with a soft light, but the light did not provide warmth. Instead of comfort, it brought an eerie sense of silent unease. There were no walls, no sky, no ground, just an endless void where he felt both weightless and incredibly vulnerable. In this emptiness, shadows began to appear. They moved slowly, their outlines sometimes becoming clear and then dissolving into the misty light. At first, Ahmed thought they were just images created by his imagination. But as he looked closer, he realized they were people. "I saw their faces," Ahmed later recounted, his voice trembling at the memory. Some had peace, as though their souls were surrounded by light. They looked forward, their eyes filled with hope. But others, they seemed to suffer from something unseen. It wasn't physical pain but something deeper, more destructive. Ahmed froze. He saw souls writhing, as if trying to free themselves from invisible chains. They reached their hands upward, as if begging for help, but nothing happened. "You couldn't hear their cries," he continued, "but I could feel them inside me." It was an indescribable horror. He realized these souls were undergoing judgment. Their actions, their words, their intentions, all were now unfolding before them like an invisible film. Ahmed saw scenes from their lives, as if someone was showing him their mistakes. He noticed a man who had led a double life, deceiving his family. He saw a woman who humiliated others, hiding malice and pride behind her smile. Their punishment wasn't from someone else, it came from within, Ahmed recalled. They became prisoners of their own actions. Every lie, Every wound they inflicted on others, now turned into something that tormented their souls. But among this horror were those who shone. Ahmed saw souls that seemed to float on waves of light. Their faces radiated peace. These were people surrounded by love and mercy. They moved forward, toward some great light. I couldn't take my eyes off them. It was inspiring, he shared. Suddenly, Ahmed felt a presence. It was something vast and all-encompassing. A voice, not a voice in the usual sense, spoke into his mind. Ahmed, look and remember. This is not the end. You will return. And then he saw something even more terrifying. Ahmed remembered a figure standing before him. The man's face was distorted, and he screamed without making a sound. This was a soul that had long pretended to be righteous, but behind the facade of piety lay deceit, malice, and greed. And then I understood, it was a mirror. Each of them saw their own reflection. They couldn't escape the truth, even if they had lied to themselves their entire lives, Ahmed explained. He felt his own soul begin to tremble, as if it too was being pulled toward judgment. But then the voice spoke to him again, it's not your time. Return and tell others. When Ahmed opened his eyes, he saw the pale ceiling of the hospital room and heard the hum of medical equipment. But he no longer felt like the same person he had been before. Something had changed in his heart, in his consciousness. He looked at his hands, weakly clasped on the blanket, and felt that this body was merely a shell. His entire being was overwhelmed by memories of the place he had visited. I came back to live differently, was the first thought that flashed through his mind. At first, he remained silent. He needed to process what had happened, to piece together all the images, sounds, and feelings he had experienced. The shadows of those who had suffered still haunted him. Their silent screams echoed in his mind. Yet, at the same time, he remembered those moving toward the light. It was a reminder that everyone has a chance, as long as they live sincerely. I couldn't ignore it, Ahmed recalled. I realized I had been given the chance to tell others about this so they could change something before it was too late. He started by examining his own life. The deeper he reflected, the more he realized how often he had missed opportunities to do better. I thought of myself as a believer. I prayed, I fasted. But it was just an outer shell. I never considered how important it is to be kind, patient, and compassionate. I could have helped, but I walked past. I could have forgiven, but I chose to hold on to grudges. And all of that, I would carry with me into that other world. Ahmed couldn't forget the words that had echoed in his consciousness. Every action you take, every word you say, even your thoughts leave a mark. You choose what that mark will be. Those words became his guiding star. He understood that faith wasn't just about prayers, it was about every action you take in your life. I saw those who shone. Their faces were full of light. They loved people, even those who had wronged them. They forgave, even when it was hard. They gave their time, money, and energy without expecting anything in return. They weren't perfect people, but their hearts were pure, and their intentions were good. Ahmed thought deeply about his own life. There were moments when he could have helped a poor neighbor but didn't. There were days when he got offended by a client's words instead of showing patience. All of this now seemed petty, but in that world, it would have cast a huge shadow over his soul. Ahmed decided to change everything. After being discharged from the hospital, he started small. He visited that same neighbor who often asked him for help. This time, he came himself, carrying a basket of groceries and offering words of support. He began donating money to help the poor and assisting children in the neighborhood. But most importantly, he learned to forgive. Ahmed realized that holding on to resentment was a burden the soul carried into eternity. He found an old friend he had stopped talking to because of a long-standing argument and was the first to extend his hand. Every good deed I did brought me a sense of peace. I no longer did it for praise or gratitude, I did it for my soul. Ahmed began sharing his story with anyone willing to listen. He spoke about the importance of living sincerely, without wearing masks. We often think we have plenty of time. We say, "I'll help tomorrow," or "I'll apologize later." But tomorrow may never come. In that world, there is no more time. All you have are your actions, your words, and your intentions. His words resonated with everyone who heard them. People cried as they listened to his story. Many said they began to view their own lives differently. I came back to say, start changing right now. Do good for others and for yourself. Even the smallest good deed can become the light that will guide your soul. Ahmed knew that his experience wasn't just a trial, it was a gift. A gift to not only change his own life but to help others reflect on theirs. His words were not a warning but an opportunity for all of us to make our lives better. Ahmed often pondered, why was he allowed to have this experience? Why was his soul permitted to enter that world, a place not everyone could see? These questions troubled him until one day, during prayer, he realized the truth: it wasn't random. It was a mission. A message for him and for everyone willing to listen. He spoke about it like this. I saw the light and the darkness. I saw souls that shone and those that suffered. All of it made me understand that our life is not just the days we live but a great journey where every action, every thought matters. Ahmed often remembered the figures he had seen in his vision. Their faces, filled with pain, their movements, as though they carried an unbearable weight. He knew, this was the burden of their own actions. He also remembered those who shone, whose souls seemed wrapped in light. These images stayed with him. When I came back, I couldn't look at the world the same way. I felt that everything around me was temporary, but our deeds last forever. I looked at people arguing, fighting, chasing money, hurting each other, and then I remembered what I had seen in that world. And I wanted to shout, stop. Ahmed started sharing his experience with anyone who would listen. Sometimes his words brought tears, sometimes silence. But they always made people think. He spoke simply but profoundly. Everything you do will come back to you. It doesn't matter if someone sees it or not. It doesn't matter if you speak or stay silent. All of it is written on your soul. When you hurt others, you create knots you'll have to untie later. When you help, you build a path of light. Ahmed emphasized the importance of small actions. We often think only big deeds matter. But that's not true. A simple smile, a kind word, forgiveness, these things may seem small, but in that world, they shine brighter than the sun. One day, he shared a story that deeply moved many. I remembered a woman in my vision holding a piece of bread. Her soul was surrounded by light because, when she was alive, she gave that bread to a hungry child. It was her last piece, but she gave it with love. That bread became the light for her soul. And I thought, how many times could I have helped but walked away? How many times could I have forgiven but chose pride instead? Ahmed understood that his message was not just a story but a call to action. He knew he couldn't change everyone, but if even one person reflected and changed their life, it would already be a victory. Many people asked me, why are you telling this story? What are you trying to prove? And I would answer, I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want people to understand, we have only one life. We will all die, but what matters is what we leave with. Your soul is your only baggage. Take care of it. Every day, Ahmed lived with the thought that his experience was a reminder. A reminder that life is fragile, but every moment is an opportunity to create something beautiful. Allah gave me a second chance so I could fix my mistakes. But not everyone will get that chance. That's why I beg you, don't wait. Don't postpone kindness for tomorrow. Don't hold on to grudges. Don't walk past those in need. You can't imagine how much it means for your soul. Ahmed often ended his stories with words that touched the deepest parts of the heart. When I stood in that place, I realized that everything around us is temporary. Our appearance, our wealth, our achievements, they mean nothing. Allah does not look at how you look or how much money you have. He looks at your heart. If it is pure, you will find peace. If it is full of evil, you will face suffering. Cleanse your heart now, while you still have time. What do you think happens to the soul after death? Share your thoughts in the comments, your opinion matters to us. If this video made you think, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Share this video with your friends and loved ones so more people can hear this amazing story.